Stop in the name of COVID before you break your heart. But what else is being done in the name of COVID? And did they lie to us? Hey, you 5.7 million awakening wonders, thank you for joining me on this voyage towards truth. Truth and all its complexity. Can there ever be one objective truth, or all we create in truth as we live our lives subjectively? Is that why we're in the middle of a culture war? Anyway, 5.7 million awakening souls can't all be wrong. Can we? Could we ever be? Well, some of us must be sometimes. We've got a fantastic episode for you today. We're talking about data capture, data abuse, and some of the regulations, legislation, and even just sort of spontaneous new systems that emerged during COVID, and how they've been subsequently corrupted in spite of the fact we were promised they never would be, like, data capture, skullduggery, tomfoolery, and jiggery-pokery. These are just some of the subjects we'll be covering. If you don't subscribe to our channel yet, why not subscribe right now? And I'm going to ask you, candidly, and from the bottom of my glorious pumping little heart hole, to turn on the notification bell, because it's really important that you do that, because I sometimes wonder about the old algorithm. Do you wonder about the algorithm? I wonder about the algorithm. Turn on the notification bell so I can communicate with you directly on this big tech platform that we're using. Right, okay, let's have a little talk about COVID. During the pandemic, governments all over the world rolled out data tracking technologies, especially contact tracing apps. Some of you were suspicious about that, weren't you? You conspiracy theorists, you said. What'll happen is they'll start getting people's data, and then they'll bundle that data up and they'll sell it to people, or the government will use it in ways that we can't even yet imagine or entirely envisage. Well, you was conspiracy theorists then. Let's see what you are now. According to technology policy experts, these technologies opened opportunities for corporations and governments to harvest data without people's consent. Wait for it. As of now, you are still a conspiracy theorist. In early June, it was revealed that the government of the Australian state of Victoria used a data agency to track the everyday activities of Victorians beyond what was required for COVID. We're only on the second paragraph, and you are no longer a conspiracy theorist. You are a concerned citizen with some valuable insight. Well done. Take off your tinfoil hat, stop worrying about the lizards, and recognise that you just understood truth. According to the Herald Sun, Insights Victoria, the data agency the government used, collected sensitive public and commercial in-confidence data in an effort to be the single truth source for the government. I don't like the single truth source. Even in our intro, I continually remind you of the complexity of truth. You don't want a single truth source. Victoria Premier Dan Andrews' staff, the Police Chief Commissioner, the Emergency Management Commissioner, and the Chief Health Officer had full access to the data. The questionable data collection was revealed following calls to ditch the Information Sharing Bill of 2021, which would have compromised patients' privacy through the creation of a system where a person's most private medical information can be shared on an electronic database without their consent. And in May, Human Rights Watch said that 89% of technologies used for remote learning harvested the learning location and personal data of students. Like, why are they prying in your business when all they're supposed to be doing is teaching you remotely? In Australia, most of these apps, including Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and Minecraft Education, remained in use even after COVID measures were lifted. So that continued beyond COVID. So it's even less of a conspiracy theory already. The Director of Tech Policy at Reset Australia, Dakshayani Suryakamaran, said, during the pandemic, multiple data extraction technologies were launched under the guise of emergency measures. She added that the technologies do not come with sufficient data protection measures or well-defined purpose limitations. Therefore, they can be abused. Wherever you stand on this, and I don't want to stoke conspiracy theories, I do a bit sometimes, but I'm not going to. But would you not feel a lot more reassured if your government, American, UK, French, Danish, wherever you are in this crazy old world, wouldn't you feel a lot better if your government went, all that data capturing, data sensitivity, all those contact trace apps, all of that ability to shut down and spy on you, that's all over now. We've shut it all down. Here's our proof. It's all cancelled. It's all closed down. Wouldn't you feel a lot better if they did that? Why are none of them doing it? Why are they saying back to work, masks off, but we'll keep hold of that? That could be useful down the line. Why? There's no kind of public engagement about what the citizen feels comfortable with in terms of how the government is using that data. And because of the power differential between institutions and individual citizens, data is used and abused. And we see really dire consequences as a result. We are living in an economy where data is one of the most valuable resources any institutional entity can actually capture, she added. Governments, like corporations, have been trying to fly under the radar and extract as much data as possible. But I think more and more, particularly with the pandemic, people are starting to understand, oh, governments and corporations are actually quite intertwined when it comes to the value chain of data extraction. If you're anything like me, you hear the government is stealing my data and corporations are stealing my data, and you get a bit bored because you're always on your phone going, yes, manage my cookies. What do you mean manage my cookies? I'm not interested in this. I'm a businessman. I don't care what you do with my cookies. But what we're starting to see is how this data can be utilized and exploited to increase the efficacy of powerful institutions. One example being in Canada, where they can just strike out your bank accounts at a moment's notice. Meanwhile, in China, they're starting to be able to shut down your ability to travel, move about, or even put your hand up in the air. I made up the last one just to test the limits of the theory. So now you understand that they are operating in excess of the agreed regulation. Here's what's happening in China. A protest planned by hundreds of thousands of bank depositors in central China. That's it, you're a bank depositor. You can't be reduced to a bank depositor. What if you've got children or even a pet cat? Well, we'll put that in a little zip bag and sling it on the corner of the street. Bank depositors in central China seeking access to their frozen funds has been thwarted because the authorities have turned their health code apps red, several depositors told Reuters. The depositors were planning to travel to the central province of Henan this week from across China to protest against an almost 2-month block on accessing at least $178 million worth of deposits, which has left companies unable to pay workers and individuals unable to access savings. Rights groups have warned that China could use its vast COVID surveillance infrastructure to stifle dissent. Without a green code on their smartphone app, citizens lose access to public transport and spaces such as restaurants and malls, as well as the right to travel across the country. So now we can see in Western countries that the data is being captured, and in China, this data is being used to restrict access to vital resources. You remember during the most extreme period of the COVID lockdown, you were denied access to restaurants or places or whatever. Well, now this is being normalized. The data is captured. We're being acclimatized to, sometimes the government just stops you doing stuff. And already it's happening in China. And we've seen that we emulated the Chinese response to COVID. Perhaps that's why people didn't question some of the release of information around the origins of the virus, because they were emulating those systems. Maybe we need to even consider our narrative that COVID is regarded as a cultural enemy. Maybe the alliances that take place are kind of above our vision of the geopolitical landscape. And I feel that sometimes our cultural models require a sustained level of desire, sustained levels of fear, sustained levels of disorientation. And the whole COVID phenomena introduced regulations and granted the opportunity to capture data, which down the line can be later exploited to advance the power of centralized interests, whether those are corporate or state. They are putting digital handcuffs on us, said a depositor from Sichuan province surnamed Chen, who declined to use his full name for fear of government retribution. Always a good sign. It could not be ascertained if the change in code was intended to block the protesters or for another reason, but 3 depositors told Reuters they knew people who had registered to travel to Henan who were not connected to the frozen funds whose codes did not turn red. I just want to offer you this idea. Before the pandemic, if the state wanted to stop a revolution, it would have involved protests, people on the street, military, tanks, the army would have had to get involved. Now, if you want to stop a political movement, let alone a revolution, they can do it with a push of a button. They can shut down your bank account, they can prevent you moving around, they can turn off your phone. I mean, I'm not saying yet necessarily, but I'm saying the jigsaw pieces are all starting to emerge. Do you imagine that it's not inevitable that at some point these pieces are going to be put together? You've seen how state and corporate power behaves. What do you think about this? Do you think that the state and corporations are looking to create situations within which their power is insurmountable, within which their objects are easily met without resistance? Let me know in the comments below. Meta Platforms Inc. is being sued over claims that private medical data is being shared secretly with Facebook when patients access web portals for some healthcare providers. Facebook's Pixel tracking tool redirects patient communications and other supposedly secure information without authorization and in violation of federal and state laws, according to the lawsuit filed Friday in San Francisco federal court as a proposed class action on behalf of millions of patients. That's incredible. So in spite of state and federal law, data is being shared in ways that's, illegal. The world's largest social network has been sued and investigated by regulators over privacy issues frequently over the last decade, most often over allegations that the company illegally collects information on users that it uses for targeted advertising. The Pixel case is different because it alleges Facebook grabbed confidential data while acting as a service provider on a hospital web portal. Now, at this point, we are necessarily putting together numerous stories in order to posit that power could operate in particular ways. When you have an institution as powerful as Facebook that is able to usurp, undermine, or ignore federal and state legislation, then it shows you how things could operate and how things could evolve. Also, it allows me to speculate, this is allegedly, that Facebook and the government have a certain type of relationship where the government are unwilling to prosecute Facebook for reasons that at this moment must remain speculative. But looking at the Chinese model, it's possible to imagine, isn't it, that big tech data and state legislative power could combine to control your reality. You've already seen in the last couple of years that overnight your government was able to say, all of you, stop going to work, get in your house, unless you're in a very low-paid job, which has to be done using your hands. Get out and get on with your bloody job and wear a mask. In fact, carry on wearing a mask. This has been an unusual couple of years. Wherever you stand on the coronavirus issues and the political and medical ideas that have grown out of it, what we have to agree upon is we do not want to grant more power to the state. We do not want more centralised power, more edicts filtering down from unelected globalist bodies that are ultimately taken up by your government without your democratic intervention being even a possibility, particularly not when these ideas are likely in the service of very powerful private and corporate interests, such as some of the big tech giants we've already listed. But that's just what I think. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Your opinion is more important than mine. My opinion evolves out of yours. We develop what we do as a result of your insight. You were ahead of us. You knew this stuff was shady from the get-go when I was just optimistically thinking, oh, I hope we get through this difficult time. You saw that this was power potentially moving in unpredictable and difficult ways. Give us a like, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't turned on the notification bell, turn the notification bell on right now. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at either of these two. Sign up to my mailing list. I'll tell you about all sorts of live streaming events. We're doing loads of streaming now. It's fantastic. Give us your information. God, I can't believe I'm saying this. We will not misuse it. We will not give it to anyone else. We'll just let you know about how we're building communities. Stay free.